When I first started drinking coffee at around 8 or 9 years old, one of my favourite drinks to get at the coffee shop was a mocha. I loved a really well-made mocha. But what makes a well-made mocha? Most of the mochas that I've had at different coffee shops have been disappointing. They use sugary hot chocolate powder as the base of their mocha. The cocoa that's in the hot chocolate powder is low quality, it's just Dutch cocoa powder. And there's no salt in the drink, it's lacking salt, which is a crucial ingredient that we'll talk a bit more about later. Now luckily that can all be avoided by making your own cocoa mix and altering the sugar levels and the flavours to get the flavour right. But if you don't want to go through the whole process of making your own cocoa mix, then there is only one pre-made cocoa mix that I would recommend for hot chocolates and mochas especially, and that is this one here. It's Hearth Hot Chocolate. I'm not sponsored by them at all, it's just my recommendation. They use undutched cocoa powder, it's got a good amount of salt in it, so it's really flavourful. And it's not too bitter, not too sweet, it's just the perfect balance. And I wouldn't use anything else for mochas and hot chocolates if I wasn't making my own mix. But that side, you really want to make your own cocoa mix to control the variables and the flavour of your mocha. The single biggest culprit of terrible mochas is sugar. Too much sugar. The amount of times that I've had mochas that are just absolute sugar bombs are countless. When you add sugar to coffee or a mocha, you're not just sweetening the drink, you're also removing the bitterness, you're dampening the bitterness. You have a drink that's super sweet, it kind of elevates and clashes with the acidity of the drink at the same time, and you've got zero bitterness. So you've got this drink that just tastes sour and off, and I don't think there's anything worse than a mocha that just tastes of sugary off milk. So if there is one thing that you can do to improve your mocha, it is bring that sugar right down, not to the point where it becomes super bitter. You want a little bit of sweetness, but you also want to be able to taste the bitterness of the coffee and the cocoa. But don't just reduce the amount of sugar that you use, diversify what sugar and sweeteners you use. You're not just locked into using white sugar. You can use golden castor for a balance between the white sugar and darker sugars. You can use muscovado or demerara, honey, maple syrup, agave, whatever you want to not just sweeten the drink, but also change up the flavour of it and add an element of complexity and depth. And just by doing that, reducing the amount of sugar and diversifying the kinds of sweeteners that you use, your mocha's above average, and the difference in flavour is phenomenal. Once you've fixed the issue with sugar, the next thing to think about is the kind of cocoa powder you're using. There are two categories of cocoa. You've got Dutched cocoa and undutched cocoa. These are the two types. Dutched cocoa is basically cocoa powder that's been processed. So I'll put down here what the Dutch process is, but it's basically cocoa powder that's gone through an alkalizing process to strip out the acids. So what you're left with is a cocoa powder that's really dark, it's basically black, and it's very bitter. There's no acids or anything in it to balance out the flavour. It's the most popular cocoa powder that you see. You can pick it up in the shops. It's the one that people are most familiar with. And it's the most commonly used one in hot chocolate mixes. And then compare that to undutched cocoa powder, which, as you might expect, is cocoa that hasn't been through the Dutch process, which means that it's minimally processed, it's retained its polyphenols, acids, everything in the cocoa that occurs naturally, and it has a much lighter colour, so it's nowhere near as dark as Dutch cocoa powder. Now, neither cocoa powder is wrong. They've both got their pros and cons and different use cases. But I think it's fair to say that Dutch cocoa powder gets used too often, and it's kind of used purely for mochas. And I think there's a lot to gain from using undutched cocoa powder. The flavour profile of natural cocoa, it's so diverse and fruity. Or even just a little bit, it just amplifies the complexity and flavour of the drink that much more. Now you might be thinking, why would I want a fruity mocha? That's kind of veering off too far from the original dark, deep flavour profile of a traditional mocha. In my experiments, I've found that using something like 50-50 Dutched and undutched cocoa powder works best for mochas. You've got this really nice, deep flavour from the Dutched side, which adds, you know, the classic dark chocolate flavour that you drink a mocha for. But you've also got just the complexity that comes with raw, real cocoa that just adds another element to the drink that you don't get from standard mochas. The acids in undutched cocoa pair really well with those in coffee, and in my experience, I've always found that mochas made with undutched cocoa taste slightly sweeter than those made with just Dutched cocoa, and I think it's got something to do with the increase in acidity, just elevating that perceived sweetness. So yeah, I'd start with like a 50-50 mix of Dutched and undutched cocoa, and then just adjust to taste. So if you want a slightly deeper, darker, more traditional tasting mocha, increase the Dutched cocoa portion. And then if you want slightly more acidity, fruitiness, a little bit more funky, then increase the undutched portion until you get the mix right for you. And then moving on to salt. Salt is one of those things you only need a little amount of to make a big impact. And the difference between a mocha with salt and one without is pretty big. What salt does is it opens up the palate. Flavours are more pronounced, sweetness is sweeter, it just improves the flavour and experience of the drink. It's exactly the same as adding salt to food. When you salt your food well, it tastes better. And if you forget to add that salt, you're missing on all of the flavours that you can amplify in that drink. It sounds kind of weird salting your drink because it's not really a done thing, but if you look at the culinary world, salt is a non-negotiable. You always add salt to your food because it opens up the palate, it adds flavour. So adding salt to your mocha is a crucial step that most people don't do or forget to do. And like I was saying before, you only need a small pinch of salt to make a big difference in the drink. And you can add this to your chocolate mix. If you're batching a large tub of hot chocolate mix, you can just put in, I don't know, 1% or 0.5% of salt, and that will give you the equivalent of a small pinch in every single drink that you make. The other thing I forgot to mention earlier, a little bonus for you that I want to talk about, is the size of the mocha. I think mochas are by default too big. If you think about the amount of sugar, even in a mocha that's got a small amount of sugar in it, it's a lot. It's a lot for the body to take in and process. And if you think about psychology, how we value things and perceive things to be valuable, a large mocha that's sweet and uses cheap ingredients is lower value than one that is smaller but has 10 times the flavour. It's made using really high quality ingredients and real care has been put into developing a balanced flavour profile. And I'd take the small one any day. It should be appreciated and savoured, not downed in a couple of gulps. And you should go those lengths to make it with high quality ingredients and make it the best you can. And I think it deserves more respect and attention than it gets. But anyways, that's my rant over. Today's video style is different, very different from my usual video style. I wanted to be a bit more natural and unscripted. I didn't write a script for this video. This is all just off the top of my head. If you learnt something today and you liked the more laid back and natural video style, then let me know in the comments. Subscribe, turn on notifications, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.